Here we go. Okay, so welcome and thank you for being here at this meetup. Tonight, I'm going to talk a little bit about how to get back your time. This is all about how to, what I hear all the time is people complaining about they've never got enough time for this and enough time for that. So I'm going to give you some very, very easy hints that will allow you to actually get back your time. So time is free, but it's also priceless. You can't own it, but you can use it. You can't keep it, but you can spend it. Once you've lost it, you can never get it back. Sorry, someone just came into the room and I got a bit distracted. So I'm going to say that again. So time is free, but it's priceless. You can't own it, but you can use it. You can't keep it, but you can spend it. Once you've lost it, you can never get it back. So time is an incredibly precious commodity. It is probably the only commodity that we can never actually get back. It's a commodity that once it's gone, it's gone. But the thing about time is that we all have 24 hours in a day. That's all we've got. But somehow some people seem to be able to use that 24 hours a lot better than others. So we're going to go through a couple of little bits and pieces tonight on how you can get back some of your time. Some little tweaks that you can do. What I wouldn't recommend is that you do everything at once. That if you want to implement some of these tweaks, that you just do one or two things here or there, and that you see how you go with implementing one change, and then once you've got the hang of that one, implementing another one. So just quickly, just a little bit about me. Over the last 6 years, I've helped hundreds of businesses and business change makers, both on and offline, develop clarity and balance. So what's a business change maker? I get asked that all the time. And usually it's a person who wants to make a difference in the world, okay? A person, whether you're selling services or products, that wants to make a difference in the world through their business, okay? And I've helped hundreds of them increase their income, find freedom, and create their dream life. So just a little bit about what I do. So I am a business coach and mentor. I actually call myself a holistic business coach and mentor because I look after not just a business, but the people involved in the business as well. And just a little bit of training for those who are going to watch this on replay or that don't know. I am just about to become a master trainer of neuro-linguistic programming, timeline therapy, hypnosis, NLP coaching. I have created my own meditation course. I also teach something called Neuro Change Method, and I love and do work with Reiki. In fact, I'm a master Reiki practitioner for 3 different types of Reiki. I'm also a practitioner of EFT, also known as emotional freedom technique or tapping. I have a diploma of holistic counselling, and I am a clinical hypnotherapist. So that's just a couple of the things I've done, not everything. I am the founder and CEO of Sandra Madaffrey Training and Mentoring, which is where I basically do my one-to-one coaching and also work with business owners. I've also got the Institute of Oneness Integration. That is where I do my training and teach other practitioners. I also have a brand new business called Consciouspreneur, and the Consciouspreneur is all about being an aware entrepreneur, because it's really important that people are aware of what's actually going on around them. So that is an online program that I run, and also a subscription box called Coaching in a Box. I'm just going to check. I think someone isn't muted, so I'm just going to mute. There we go. All done. Thank you. So they are the 4 current businesses that I actually run. And they're just some of the logos that belong to those. So let's have a look at some of the things that you can do to actually get back your time. So the first one is easier said than done. Just say no. I think sometimes we feel really, really bad and we find it difficult to say no. And if anyone has any comments, just drop them in the chat. I'd love to know what you think as we go along through this webinar tonight. And also, or you can unmute yourself. You're very welcome to do that as well. It's really interesting that people can't say no because they think they're offending the other person. But it's really important that if you want to get back time, that there are some things that you must say no. And usually this is the way I want you to think about it. If you say no to some of the little things, it will free up your time to say yes to some of the bigger things. So every time someone asks you to do something, if it's something that you don't want to do, you need to tell them, just say no. You don't really need an explanation. It also helps. What tends to happen is when people don't say no, especially in the work environment, and they really want to say no, people overstep their boundaries, right? But because the person hasn't said no, the person who has asked doesn't actually realize that they have overstepped the other person's boundaries, and it keeps happening. So the best thing that you can do, not only for yourself, but for other people that ask things of you, is to just say no. And only spend your time on things that you need to. It doesn't mean you say no to everything. You have to evaluate everything on its merits, and there will be some things that you might just need to say no to free up a little bit of time. And especially if you know that you can't fit something in, it's really important that you respect your own boundaries and you say no. The next one is get up on time. Now we're going to talk about your internal body clock in a moment. But if you have a look at what we're going to talk about tonight, and if you set your calendar up and you know that you need to be ready to have a meeting or do something at, let's say, 9 a.m. in the morning, and you need to get up at 8, don't hit that snooze button. Because one of the other things that this does, it's not just about wasting time hitting that snooze button, okay? It's also, it actually starts to create anxiety and overwhelm. And I might just ask, someone's just jumped in the room, if we can just get my mute as well, please. I'll just do that for you. Thank you. So get up on time, make sure that you start to plan. We're going to talk about planning your time out. And if you decide that you need to get up at a specific time, you must get up on time. We don't hit the snooze button. If you're a serial snooze button hitter, one of the little tips that I learned years ago is that you put your alarm somewhere where you can't reach it, and then you're going to have to get out of bed, or even if you use your mobile phone, you're going to have to get out of bed, right, and go and turn it off. So that's another really important one. The next one is to turn off technology. Unfortunately, right, one of the best things that was ever invented is technology, but it's also one of the worst things as well. So when you have things to do, when you need to work, when you're sitting there doing a task, when you're going through your to-dos, you should turn all your technology off. Your phones, your emails, notifications to social media. Because what tends to happen is you go backwards and forwards between what you're doing and what's happening in the technology. And unfortunately, when it comes to looking at technology, right, we cannot multitask. So what happens is you might not think it takes a while, but it takes a few seconds for your mind to adjust to what you're looking at in technology, and then a few seconds again for your mind to adjust to what you're doing. So if you're doing this constantly, you're actually losing a lot of productive time without actually being aware. So when you start doing whatever it is that you have to do for your day, turn it off. You can get back to it later. This is an interesting one. Understand your internal clock. Now, this is really important. A lot of people get up, early in the morning, and they try and get all this stuff done in the morning, and they're not morning people. I'm not a morning person. I work better in the afternoon. So I understand my internal clock, and I organize my time so that I sleep in a little bit more in the morning and I go to bed a little bit later at night. It's really important that we all get a good 8 hours sleep, because it has a lot to do with brain science, and it does affect our brains and, and neuroplasticity and our repairing and rejuvenating of our brains. But you need to understand your internal clock, because if you are not a morning person like I am, I can tell you now that if I got up at 5 o'clock in the morning, I would be completely unproductive. And by 8 o'clock at night, I'd be wanting to go to bed again. So understand what time of the day works best for you. Understand how you can get that 8 hours sleep, and then work backwards and work out what time you have to get up, and then you get up. So these steps are all a combination of one another, not just one. Okay, so you look at them all together. Another important one is make lists. And I want to talk about making lists. So I think I've got someone in the chat. That's exactly me. I'm most productive post noon and go on early till late night. Absolutely. And that's fine. You know what? If that works for you, you make it work around you. I often teach about something I call the shoulda, woulda, couldas, where we get told, we should be part of the 5 a.m. club and we should do this and we should do that. I don't prescribe to that. I think that we all have our own internal clock, and that we all should work to that internal clock. So if you're not good in the mornings, as long as you get 8 hours sleep, that's very important. It doesn't matter, right? As long as when you set your alarm to go off, you get up on time and don't hit that snooze, you will be fine, and you will become more productive, because what happens there is that you're actually following your own flow. I listened to something the other day. They said every time you get interrupted, it takes 20 minutes to get back on to where you were before you were interrupted. So probably similar if you were constantly checking your phone. Yes. Yeah, 20 minutes could, it depends. If it's a big interruption, it would be 20 minutes. It does take, it takes, not just that time to look. You sort of look and you register, right? And then you have to look back to what you're doing, and then you have to register again. So you actually are losing a lot of precious time. Also, too, on another note, and I've just thought of this, is that if you've got those, your phone beeping in the background, or you've got your notifications on, your mind's not focused on what you want to be listening to, or what you're supposed to be, doing at that moment. And multitasking is not possible. Now, the word multitasking started when computers were created. And one of the selling points of the first, I think it was IBM computers, was that they could multitask, but computers actually don't multitask. People think that computers do everything at once, but they actually don't. The programs, one program switches on, it switches off, and the other program comes on. So multitasking is a word that sort of became part of our language in, I think, the mid-50s, 1950s. and it was used for computers, and all of a sudden it was picked up that humans can multitask. But let me tell you, humans, you actually cannot multitask. You cannot consciously focus on one thing, more than one thing at a time. You think you are, but you're actually not. You might think that you can multitask, but you actually can't. And that is actually being scientifically proven, which is really interesting. That's what I do too. I have created focus blocks. Absolutely. We're going to talk about those in a minute. My phone and emails are off and it works amazing. Absolutely does. So sorry, there's just someone else jumping in, so I'll let them in. So the other thing that I want to talk about when it comes to making lists. Now, one of the best ways I've learned to make lists is to actually not use a piece of paper or a pad to make the list, right? I don't know what's happening. Every time someone comes in, they're not muted for some reason, but that's all good. We'll get them there. Beautiful. Okay. So rather than writing your lists down on a piece of paper or in a book or something like that, my favorite way to make lists is on sticky notes. I have piles and piles of colored sticky notes everywhere. And what you do is you make lists and then you put your to-dos in different piles. So what you would do is you would put the urgent things with deadlines in your first pile, and they're the ones you've got to do first. Then you put in your second pile urgent things without deadlines. Then you put on your third pile the next most pressing. And then the fourth pile of to-dos should be things that it doesn't matter as long as you get to them eventually. Now, what will happen is those piles might shift, because today you might do the urgent with a deadline, but tomorrow, some of the things that were urgent but without a deadline might become urgent with a deadline. So you work through your to-do lists like that, and that tends to help. And always, and if you get things down out of your head on paper, you actually, you clear up your mind, you clear up your focused thinking, okay? And it allows you to work better. The other thing that you would want to do when it comes to lists is it's about, you know, putting things, scheduling things into your diary. So one of the things that I like to do is you schedule your deadlines and work backwards. So for instance, if you have a deadline for something that needs to be finished next week, you sit there, you have a look at this, you put it into your planner as it must be finished that day. And then you need to work out, how long is this going to take me? And you work backwards. Maybe it might take you 5 hours. So let's say it's 7 days away, but you only want to work 5 days, the Monday to Friday. You might do an hour on that every day. So you block out an hour. And so when you do that, by the time you get to the end of that 7 days, you're not so rushed. You feel like you've gotten plenty of time because you've scheduled in before the deadline hits. And it means that you're not always rushing and feeling like overwhelmed, because a lot of the time people think they don't have time because they're feeling very, very overwhelmed. The other thing that's really important is that you need to calendar things. You need to I have a calendar, and what I do in my planner is that I actually block out times in my planner. So let's say we talk about that task that needs to be due in a week. I will actually work backwards and I will actually block out an hour each single day to get it done. Now, it's been very well known that if you have a break every 20 minutes or so, you actually become more productive. So if I'm working on something that's going to take quite a while, what I usually do is I'll have a break in between. So I'll do my first 20, 25 minutes, have a break, and then finish it. And then I move on to something else. And it's really important that when you do calendar things and block out your time to do things, that when your time is up, that you need to stop and have a break and then move to your next task. Because what happens, what I tend to see people do is they work just on one task. They get a bit tired of it. Their brain starts to shut down because they've been working on it for so long. And what happens is they become unproductive. So if you're varying your tasks and always working backwards, don't leave things till the last minute, you find that you seem to all of a sudden be able to attract more time. So make sure everything is put into the planner and you block out the time that you need, and don't leave things till the last minute. Work backwards. This is another interesting one, and that's avoid meetings. A lot of people have meetings that are completely unnecessary and waste a lot of time. There are some meetings that are unavoidable, yes, like sometimes you might have to have an important first meeting with a client. Sometimes you might need to have review meetings. But before you go into a meeting or organize a meeting, ask yourself, is there a more effective and efficient way of handling this rather than going into a meeting? It's one of the things that I teach in NLP, and it was really funny because during my last training, I actually had a school teacher, and she said, schools need to learn about this, because she said we have so many meetings that are just such a waste of time. So think about it. Do we need the meeting or not? And the last one is touch it only once. What does that mean? It means that you don't double handle things all the time. You look at something. If it's time for you to answer your emails, for instance, like I block out times of my day where I use it just for social media or just for emails. If someone sends an email and they need something, I do it there and then. I don't leave it and go, I'll do it later. Because the other problem that this creates is that it sits in the back of your mind and you're sitting there trying to work away at something else, and you're going, I've got to answer that email later. I've got to answer that email later. So if it's something that you can do there and then, do it rather than leaving it. So here's just a couple of little tips that I wanted to present on little tweaks that you can make to actually get back some time. But the most important one is scheduling your time, working backwards with your tasks so that you're never at the end of deadlines, and saying no when you can't do something. So I'm going to stop the share and come back into the room. I'll stop the recording.